You're listening to 94.4 FM, the Friday Sports Show, for your host, Jimmy Petruzzi, bringing news from like where and around the world. We aim to bring Salford to the world to Salford. We're fortunate to show we've had many top athletes, sports people, coaches, sports psychologists join us on the show. We also have a segment where we feature some of the most influential people in the field of psychology and related fields who've come on board to share some insights into the area of expertise. Today we have a very fascinating guest. I think you're going to really be fascinated by today's guest. I know we have a lot of people listening to the show who are really interested in sort of coaching related fields and psychology. So today we're for a really fascinating insight into the world of coaching and psychology. Today's guest is an author. She's a registered psychologist in Australia and France, and she blends psychology with coaching and positive psychology as well. No doubt there's a lot more to what she does. I'm probably not going to do a justice in the intro, but she'll give us more of an insight into what she does as well. She's also the co-founder of the Coaching Ethics Forum as well. So Wendy-Ann Smith, great to have you on board. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
No, it's great to speak to you, Wendy. Can we sort of start from the beginning, Wendy? How did you get involved in psychology and sort of coaching? It's quite interesting sort of blend psychology and coaching. Where did it all begin for you?
It began as an adult student. I was, I think I was in my late 20s or early 30s, and I was late 20s, and I was studying part-time at in Wollongong, New South Wales, Australia, and I was studying management leadership, and I happened to go through to the third year, and interestingly enough, I was probably the person you would least expect to finish, and yet I ended up being the only woman to finish the whole 3 years of that particular diploma. But the point about that, actually, that was a little cute little memory for me to think of, actually, but the main point about that, and it's linked to psychology, was that all the subjects in those 3 years that I really loved and was passionate about were psychologically based. As soon as you started putting me into the economic subjects, I just didn't really want to be there.
That's really... Sorry, Wendy,
Following that, then I knew I needed to move into more study. I wanted to do more study, and so university was the place to go, and I decided to tap into psychology from there.
That's fascinating stuff. And in terms of can we sort of just a bit of an insight to the positive psychology? It's an area that sort of really fascinates me, and no doubt from the listeners, it's an area that sort of is really interesting as well. I mean, can you give us a bit more of an insight into sort of positive psychology, please, Wendy-Ann?
Yeah, so, when we're studying psychology, we normally study everything that's going wrong with people and how we might try and fix that. And positive psychology comes from the other end of the spectrum. It says, there's a lot of people that are doing really well in the world, and what is it that makes them tick, that helps them do really well? So positive psychology is about the study of how people function really well in society and tries to give us a lot of insights that we can implement even if we're not feeling so well, or even if we're doing well, but we can just keep enhancing our quality of life with different understandings about, what it is that actually brings us a really good psychological quality of life.
Absolutely. And in terms of, say, like to give our listeners an idea of the sort of work that you would do, and obviously, you're right, you're an author and involved in sort of coaching ethics as well, and sort of conferences. But can you give us like an idea of sort of where you're up to in the moment in terms of sort of your own professional career? Obviously, you mentioned there sort of psychology, sort of training in that area, and in coaching as well. Where would you say you are at the moment in terms of professionally, and what sort of people would you generally work with?
So I think you're asking me about the kinds of activities I do within my work.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, since you've already named a few different things, so the writing, the editing, I'm also researching around coach maturity, how coaches understand their professional journeys and growth. And I also teach psychology students here in France about positive psychology and coaching psychology. And coaching psychology is the thing that I'm really strong at. If I was to say, what is it that I do that I get really well and work with really well, that foundationally it's the coaching psychology. So the psychology of coaching, change processes, understanding how the different types of interventions or happenings within coaching, kind of the processes, the psychological processes of those. I understand that very well, so I really enjoy that. I do coach people of all kinds of people, of all areas of society, but I don't do a lot of it. I really keep a really small number of clients on board, because I do that because I like to have a good range of activities that I like to do. You know, at the moment I have a third book which is almost ready to go to the publisher, and it is a whole series of case studies of ethical dilemmas in coaching.
Well, that's really interesting, yeah. No, that's really, really interesting. And could you sort of give us more of an insight into the book itself, Wendy-Ann? That's really fascinating in terms of, like, you know, we hear about ethical dilemmas in sort of like counselling and psychology and other areas, but sort of a bit of an insight into sort of what sort of the book involves and what can the reader expect from the book.
Okay, so there's two books on ethics, and perhaps I've gone a bit ahead of myself talking about the one that hasn't been submitted yet to the publisher.
Yeah.
So the case study dilemmas, that will be submitted in April to the publisher.
Fantastic.
And it will come out about November. So that's just a book. That is
one
a
to
book
keep an
like
eye out.
40-odd case studies with ethical dilemmas. The book that's coming out right now, that it will be available. It's available on pre-order now, but it's will be delivered in early April. Is called the Ethical Coaches Handbook. Yeah. So this is it's a 26-chapter book which looks at ethics in a whole range of nuanced ways within the helping professions. And I say helping professions because it can be coaching, it can be within psychology itself, and any other kind of helping profession. So you've got whole chapters that look at the theory and the practice. So there's a practical element to every chapter in this book. Yeah. The theory of, say, note-taking and all the considerations you need to be thinking about. The theory of the psychological contract that happens in the helping professions. And that is really eye-opening when you start reading that, thinking about parallel processing and how that might adjust the contracting you're having with your clients. Yeah. So there's some fascinating chapters in this current, the Ethical Coaches Handbook, which is coming out next month.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, Wendy. And I mean, in the UK, coaching isn't, well, at least that I'm aware of, is sort of not regulated in the sense that, I don't believe in the UK statutory regulation. So I suppose that leaves it open to kind of like a big transparency. I'm not sort of one to undermine people who, might have learned how to sort of coach in their own way, but obviously that sort of creates its own dilemma type thing. And just out of interest, what's it like in, say, France and Australia? Is there sort of like a regulation in terms of official regulation, or is it sort of similar to the UK where, I don't think there's anything against the law to say someone can call themselves a coach type thing? And I suppose with that comes the issue is how qualified is this person? Obviously you're very well qualified, but equally you could have someone who just does a 2-day, not undermining a 2-day program, but you'd like to think they got, a bit more background knowledge before they sort of go out there and sort of, especially in this area, which is like a challenging area. But what's it like in, say, France and Australia? Have you got any insights into that maybe you could share? Or?
Well, I can give you the worldwide view of coaching is that it is an unregulated field of practice. The only place where coaching is regulated is with the BPS, and it's called the charter to be chartered as a coaching psychologist. So that's the only regulation that is there. the other coaches who are not psychologists, but they are coaches, and they'll be trained, that they can be accredited with various different coaching bodies,
yes,
such as the EMCC or the
of course, yeah.
International Coaching Federation or the Association for Coaching, and many others.
Mm.
There are coach accrediting bodies with have some. Once you're accredited with them, there is some kind of oversight,
yes,
in relation to practice. But generally speaking, because it's unregulated, anyone can call themselves a coach. This is true. So you need to be really mindful about, who you engage with for your coaching, which just happens to be one of the chapters in the Ethical Coaches Handbook. It's around the promotion of coaching, and what you might be looking for to kind of discern, who's going to be a best fit for you. What training have they got? What kind of evidence-based practices do they engage in, and what training do they have to help them have that baseline?
Yeah.
So it's some very important things that I'm hoping this book will, keep pushing and helping mould the coaching industry into a more credible profession.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think there's sort of some great courses out there, and I think there's certainly some great people working out there. I think the concern sometimes, like for me personally, at times, and sort of like when I sort of, the lack of understanding with some coaches in say like mental health, there's sort of that fine line between it being a clinical issue and, I think there's sort of, if they don't have that understanding that someone could be, suffering with a clinical issue. It's not like a question of like motivation and things like that. It's just a question of like, and that's what I think the evidence-based is really key, and having someone that has an understanding of sort of these areas as well. It's not always easy for people to sort of like, I'm not to say people can't benefit if they've got a clinical issue from coaching, but I suppose sort of knowing their remit type thing, where they fit into things. I mean, like in terms of, we hear all sorts of stuff really, to be fair, in terms of the coaching side of things. And is that sort of like, in your own path, one area, I know you're passionate about it, that you look and maybe sort of with the conference and other things, sort of bring people together and have some sort of standard that sort of people can aspire to be or work at?
I mean, it's good to be speaking about mental health and coaching, and what I really, because there are cautions around that, but what I really like is what we see happening at the moment. It's started to just flourish across the coaching space, and that is really creditable organisations are providing mental health courses, so as coaches can become more aware of picking up these little nuances of people that make them more alerted to the fact that, perhaps I'm looking at a mental health issue, not a coaching issue. And it's difficult to discern as well, but these courses, they're like mental health first aid or something like that. It gives the coaches the capacity to sit with it for a bit, so as they're not just leaving people hanging, and then helping them be able to move them on to wherever they need to get more help. So this is a really new part of coaching which is happening over the last 12 months, and it's really you've got institutions like the Institute of Coaching, which is based in the US, and they are running out some really great courses on that very issue.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think that's sort of, really important that a coach sort of has some sort of background in sort of, mental health, particularly if they sort of have a client that might have trauma or something along them lines, really, and they might sort of need the appropriate help. That's not to say, obviously, under sort of clinical guidance they can't get coaching, but it's a whole different sort of field, obviously presents a whole different sort of dynamic, really. But do you feel that sort of having that sort of psychology background yourself, Wendy-Ann, is you're well placed in terms of sort of understanding, obviously this not just the psychology of people, but also having an idea in terms of like what could be maybe an area that someone needs help, maybe signposting somewhere else, and they might need help from a different clinician type thing.
Absolutely. certainly, if you're a registered psychologist, you have the skills to be working around the mental health area specifically and helping people with mental illness. The challenge is that when you're a coach, even for me as the coaching psychologist, I don't provide therapy anymore.
Yeah.
But I know how to. I have the capacity, I have the skills, I have the knowledge, but that's not the space I sit in anymore. So if someone comes to me and I'm thinking, this person is coachable, but they also need to perhaps go to therapy, and I need to be mindful that I don't switch hats and then move into therapy mode, because it's very easy to do, to just accidentally move into that space. So it can be challenging even for someone like myself who is a psychologist to make sure that you're sitting, you know where you're sitting in relation to your practice. And so you can have these ideas and hypotheses about what's going on, and be able to move, suggest that they seek help elsewhere. But you do need to be careful, no matter what your helping background is.
No, absolutely. That's really interesting stuff, and some interesting sort of takeaways for our listeners who maybe are like going into the field or maybe already in the field, and sort of a bit of an insight really. In terms of your role to co-founder the Coaching Ethics Forum, can you tell us a little bit about what that involves, Wendy-Ann, please?
Yeah, so this was an idea born back in the March of 2021, and it was, we want to shake up ethics in coaching a bit. We need to make it more prominent, give it the central forepoint or forethought of everyone who's working in the space, and really start to influence and educate the coaching profession or field of practice, as most of us call it, really. It's just profession's much easier to say. And so we then decided to go about putting on the first conference. And so under 12 months it was, from idea to conference completion, it was under 12 months. So we built the whole conference, 2 days, 2 full long days, hugely successful. Everyone loved it. It was very engaging. I've even had feedback from one academic institution in continental Europe who said that they went and revamped their whole postgraduate coaching curriculum.
Amazing. On
the back of our ethics conference. And it gave me goosebumps to get this feedback, because that's exactly why we're here. That's one of the primary reasons that we're doing this. So that was really, really wonderful news, and it was just such a great conference. So we're holding the second one in December this year, December 8th and 9th. You can already register. We have, pre-sales going on already. So I think it's coachingethicsforum.com, and we're looking to have this one, I think this year is going to be even bigger than the first one. The first one was already huge for a first conference, hugely successful. Is
that an in-person conference, or is that over the?
No, it's virtual for the very reason that we want to cross all time zones as well as we possibly can. And for that reason, we also have the speakers or the panels. They are all recorded and then available on the website afterwards for a period of time. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't attend, because the real gift and the nourishment of the conference is to be there in person, because the sessions are highly interactive. And not only do we have speakers and panel discussions, but we have lots of breakout rooms that happen, discussion breakout rooms in between.
Brilliant.
And there people actually get to be really, really vocally engaged in various different topics. They are facilitated by a number of the speakers and so forth. So it's a conference that you shouldn't just be relying on attending the recordings. The purpose of the recordings is to really allow those people who would be sound asleep at 3 a.m., say, that they can at least listen to parts of the conference that they would totally miss out on. Otherwise, it's not really meant to be a replacement of attending if you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That sounds really interesting, really fascinating, Wendy-Ann. In terms of, I know it's hard to give anyone sort of advice, not possible to give anyone advice, but maybe like a few tips if anyone's sort of listening in, thinking maybe they want to go into sort of coaching at some point. I know it's just, I mean, that's the thing, it's such a, I think it can be a minefield for people sort of like thinking to get into coaching. Is there any sort of insights you can give, Wendy-Ann, anyone sort of maybe listening in, thinking, well, maybe I'd like to get into coaching at some point, but not quite sure? I know obviously sort of you're not in the UK, but just as a general rule, what should they look out for? What are some things they should take into consideration if they want to go down the coaching path?
I think firstly, just look at who you're looking at to be trained with. What kind of courses are they putting together? Are they putting together really short 2 or 3 or 1 week courses? They're not going to give you what you need to be a creditable coach. That's too short. So I think if you're wanting to have really good quality coaching, look at different academic institutions for their coaching courses that they have. There are a number of them available in the UK.
Yeah.
And also look at the the ICF, International Coaching Federation.
Yeah.
Look at their website, because they will have listed on their website coach training organisations that have been accredited by them.
Yes, yeah.
And so I think this, gives you a better baseline in relation to seeking out your training for coaching. And then following your training, you need to be engaged regularly in supervision.
Yeah.
And you can also attend things that I hold is where I call them nourishing for coaches. So it's online group work. Where we look at positive psychology and coaching and getting the coaches to use all this information and knowledge on themselves, and then we discuss how it plays out in their coaching.
Brilliant. No, absolutely. Because I can imagine, like, as a coach, obviously it can be, a lonely world in the sense that if you're out there, sort of you're working on your own, and obviously supervision is sort of really important, and also maybe having that network of people to sort of, if nothing else, at least to sort of bounce some ideas and like it's one of them, the old sort of analogy, who motivates the motivates. It's great to have that for sure. And in terms of your own sort of vision, and there's a lot of things you're sort of working on at the moment. No doubt, you carry on the great work, but is there anything sort of share in terms of like your vision sort of going forward, Wendy-Ann, sort of like where sort of do you think you're going with things? You've got conferences, the books, and obviously the teaching you do as well. And can you share anything with your vision, where you sort of see yourself going forward with this?
Well, I have a few things on my mind about what area I'd like to focus on going forward to have an impact, somewhat like the ethics in coaching impact. But what I'm currently focusing on is really at the moment is this short-term this year stuff. So we've got Alona Bonnywell and I are doing a 2-day masterclass in Paris. When are we doing that? Early, I think the first week of July, we're running this, and that's based on our edited book of positive psychology coaching in the workplace. So we're running that. I'm also working with Sam Isaacson on facilitating. Sorry, at the end of the day, I'm facilitating workshops around relationships in the workplace, given that we're often working in a hybrid space. But even if it's not in a hybrid working setup, so we're focusing these workshops on corporations and people in corporations and around their relationships to really improve their working relationships. So these are the short-term things that I'm currently working on, as well as my Nourishing Coaches work groups, which are I'm the supervisor very soon as well. So that will play out with that.
Brilliant. No, it's interesting stuff. And in terms of like anyone listening who sort of maybe wants to get in touch, is there any sort of website or social media they can sort of like get in touch or find out more about what you're doing? Wendy-Ann, if sort of anyone sort of tuning in thinking, well, I want to know more about, the books or the conferences or any of the workshops that are coming up, is there anywhere they can sort of check out your work or possibly get in touch?
Yeah, so the place I keep most up to date is on LinkedIn, so you can find me as Wendy-Ann Smith on LinkedIn. My first name, Wendy-Ann, is hyphenated. And you can also look up my website, eclorev, eclorev.eu. But LinkedIn is a very good one, and just Google Wendy-Ann Smith and coaching psychology. That collection of words will bring me up on Google as well.
Brilliant, that's fantastic. Now, it's been really fascinating speaking to you, Wendy-Ann. It's been some, really interesting insights in terms of the work you do, and no doubt that we've only sort of, not even scratched the surface. I mean, obviously, you could speak for hours and then and not cover it all. I know you do a lot of work and that sort of stuff, a lot of great work. So it's been great to sort of speak to at least to give our listeners a bit of an insight into the sort of work you do, coaching itself and psychology as well, and how psychology works with coaching. So it's been really fascinating speaking to you. I really want to thank you for coming on board the show. Been great to have you on board. That was Wendy-Ann Smith, who's been really kind to sort of join us on the show, the Friday Sports Show with your host, Jimmy Petruzzi on 94.4 FM. Bringing you news from local area around the world. We aim to increase participation of sport and awareness, but it also aim to sort of introduce different professions and different people who are doing some great work around the world to give us insights into what they do. So thanks for listening.